Imagine trying to understand 1,000 years of history, but your only guide is a collection of sacred hymns. That's exactly the challenge and the magic of the Vedic period. We're talking about an era that didn't just influence ancient India. It literally wrote the source code for its society, its religion, and its politics for thousands of years to come.
So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll see how this new era got started. Then, we'll look at the blueprint they created for their society. After that, we'll explore what they held dear. We're talking gods, fire, and cattle. And finally, we'll see how they went from small tribes to full-blown kingdoms.
All right, so every new chapter has to start somewhere, right? Well, the story of the Vedic period kicks off right as another great civilization, the Indus Valley civilization, was mysteriously fading away. Now, take a look at this timeline. Around 1500 BCE, something new starts to happen. Groups of people speaking an early form of Sanskrit start migrating into the subcontinent from the northwest. Now, this wasn't some big, sudden invasion. Think of it more as a gradual flow of people and ideas that over 1,000 years completely transformed the region.
So, how in the world do we know any of this? Well, it's because of these texts, the Vedas. They're the reason we even call it the Vedic period. But here's the catch. They aren't history books. They're this huge collection of sacred hymns, prayers, and instructions for rituals. They're our one and only window into how these people saw their world.
And, these texts do a lot more than just talk about gods. They actually give us the blueprint for the entire Vedic society. So let's dive in and see just how they put their world together.
Well, the answer is a pretty powerful social structure that would go on to influence India for centuries. It was a system they called the Varnas. Basically, society was sorted into 4 main groups, or Varnas, and each one had a very specific job. You had the Brahmins up top. They were the priests and scholars, kind of the brains of the operation. Then came the Kshatriyas, the warriors and rulers who provided protection. The Vaishyas were the engine of the economy, the farmers, traders, and craftspeople. And finally, you had the Shudras, who provided the labor and services that kept everything else running.
But here's the really crucial part. When this system started, it was probably more flexible, based on what you did. But as the centuries rolled by, it hardened. It became a lot more rigid, a strict hierarchy that you were simply born into.
Okay, so we've got the social structure. But what really made this world tick every single day? Well, to get that, we need to look at 3 things that were absolutely core to their lives: their gods, the ritual of fire, and the ultimate status symbol, cattle. You can tell a lot about people by who they worship. Their main gods really reflected what mattered to them. You had Indra, the powerful god of thunder and war, super important for rain and protection. Then there was Agni, the god of fire. He was seen as the messenger, the one who carried offerings from humans up to the heavens. And kind of watching over everything was Varuna, who kept the whole cosmos in order.
And the main way they worshipped was through something called the yajna, of fire sacrifice. Now, this was no simple prayer. We're talking about massive, elaborate rituals led by the Brahmins. And they believed this was essential, not just to make the gods happy, but to literally keep the universe balanced and running smoothly.
Now, that brings us to the biggest economic change of the entire period. In the early days, it was all about cattle. Your wealth, your status, it was measured by the size of your herd. But then, a huge shift happened. People started settling down and farming, and suddenly, the most valuable thing you could own wasn't cattle anymore. It was land.
And what happens when people start owning land? Well, you need to govern it. That one shift from herding to farming kicked off a huge political change that took them from scattered tribes to actual organized kingdoms. You can almost watch it unfold in 3 steps. At first, you just have small tribal groups, based on family, led by a chief. Then, as they settle, these tribes start banding together into bigger territories, called janapadas. And out of that, the whole idea of a single powerful king, whose son would one day take over, really starts to take hold. And make no mistake, this was a massive deal. This whole process of going from tribes to kingdoms wasn't just a local change. It was building the very foundation, the political template, for the great empires that would come to dominate India later on.
So, let's just quickly recap the big points. The Vedic period is an era we understand through its sacred texts, the Vedas. It created a 4-part social structure called the Varnas. Its economy made a massive pivot from cattle to land, and its politics grew up from simple tribes into the first real monarchies.
And that leaves us with